Thanos' plan in Infinity War makes absolutely no sense. There will be spoilers in this one, but if you've seen the movie, stick around and I'll explain why.
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit.
Welcome to the occupation. Hang your collar up inside. Hang your freedom higher.
It's the only way to be sure.
I've never really been into comics. I like them well enough, and I've liked plenty of comic book movies, but I'm not much of a comic book reader. So when the MCU launched, I wasn't burdened with a lot of expectations about how the story should go. One thing upon which pretty much every comics fan I know who has read the stories the MCU is based on has agreed about is that Thanos' motivation in the comics for collecting the Infinity Stones and wiping out half the life in the universe is kind of dumb. If you don't know it already, here it is. He's in love with Lady Death and thinks killing half the universe will impress her. That's a really short version, but I think that sums it up well. Thanos has done a lot of killing in comic books to get her attention, I'm told, but she doesn't ever reciprocate his devotion. So in the 1991 series The Infinity Gauntlet, he goes for broke. He's finally going to win her love by killing half of the life in the universe, and that's the foundation of the Infinity War arc in the MCU. It's pretty lame. I've yet to discuss the topic with a comics fan who wasn't hoping the MCU would give Thanos a better reason to do what he's doing. Now, Infinity War is a pretty damn good movie. Regrettably, Thanos' motivation for killing half the life in the universe in the movie is actually dumber than the Lady Death thing in the comics. He wants to wipe out half of all life because there aren't enough resources to support them. The universe is immense, but Thanos is obsessed with finite resources. This is an age-old form of apocalyptic thinking. We call it Malthusianism after Thomas Malthus. Right before the turn of the 19th century, he famously predicted that the growth of the human population would inevitably lead to starvation because the population would outstrip its ability to feed itself. The human population of the Earth is estimated to have reached 1 billion for the first time in 1804, a few years after Malthus predicted we would all starve. 200 years later, there are over 7 billion of us, but the percentage of the total population that suffers from malnutrition or starvation is dramatically lower. But the fact that Malthus's prediction was spectacularly wrong hasn't killed off the idea. It crops up again and again, only to fail every time. Ingenuity has always outdone it. So presumably, Thanos is pretty smart. He should certainly know more than an early 19th century British cleric. But movie Thanos buys into Malthusianism with his entire being. He spends a lifetime pursuing his goal. But even if the core basis for the idea hadn't been wrong every time it's ever reared its nonsensical head, it would still be a terrible idea. I know they called him the Mad Titan, but even a madman would have trouble not noticing that his Malthus-inspired plot has several holes in it large enough to crash a moonlet onto a planet through. By the time he boards the Asgardian ship to get the Tesseract, he has spent decades on this project. We see some of that when he calls Gamora's planet in the flashbacks. It's clear he's done that sort of thing a lot. Why? Because his own planet rejected his idea for solving its resource allocation problem. As well they should. It's insane. Also, it's objectively evil. First of all, the Titan he shows the Avengers with the Reality Stone is clearly technologically advanced enough to have solved this problem in any number of ways. Tony's new nanotech suit in the movie pops out of a box on his chest in mere moments. Titan looks to have been at least Tony Stark's technological equal. Killing half the population is a pretty radical idea compared to, say, mining asteroids or colonizing other planets, of which there are billions available. Terraforming, or perhaps Titan-forming, a few would solve the problem for generations. And there will always be more planets if they're needed. So his plan is monumentally stupid. Sure, there are still humans who buy into Malthusianism, even though it's never not been wrong, but that doesn't explain why Thanos buys into this nonsense. The writers didn't think this through because the original story's idea is genius compared to this crap. Second, his so-called solution is quite obviously temporary. Thanos tells Gamora that her home planet is a paradise now. But if it did actually get so overpopulated that it needed culling one time, it's inevitable that it will do so again. And so will the rest of the universe he wants to kill half of. At some point in the many years he's been pursuing this project, this fact really should have occurred to him. Further, the temporariness problem is exacerbated by his own claim that he's the only one with the will to do what needs to be done. Because, even if his plan wasn't evil and insane in equal measure, it will absolutely have to be done again every few generations. Someone will have to put on the Infinity Gauntlet and call the sentient population of the universe every time this problem recurs. Again and again and again. Forever.
You know, crazy people don't know they're going crazy. They think they're getting saner.
Finally, if the gauntlet makes one effectively all-powerful, wouldn't it make more sense to use it to do something less, batshit crazy? It would be child's play for him to transform barren planets to be livable, or maybe just create new ones. There's certainly plenty of otherwise unproductive matter available in space to use for this. There are all manner of adjustments he could make with the gauntlet to address the scarcity of resources. Or he could create energy-to-matter technology so people can just turn abundant solar energy into stuff, and so on and so on. In short, there are quite a few options, almost any one of which would have the galaxy's greatest heroes working with him to make it happen rather than fighting him to the death to stop him. I loved Infinity War, but the basic driver of the plot must be judged a failure. Thanos getting the Infinity Gauntlet necessarily requires that the story be that he's trying to kill half the universe. That's a given. I do appreciate that Marvel tried to update Thanos' storyline for the movies by sticking to the core of his plan in the books. It would have been all too easy to just go with some tried-and-true megalomaniac who wants to rule the universe plot, and they didn't do that. But the new motivation for Thanos that they went with does not stand up to even a moment's scrutiny. The producers have said that part of the reason they dumped Lady Death from the storyline was the lack of time to introduce a whole new character to the audience and establish Thanos' relationship to her. I note, of course, that these drawbacks didn't stop them from foisting Captain Marvel on us at literally the last minute. But even leaving that aside, if this is the best alternative they could come up with, they'd have been better off sticking closer to the source material by tweaking Hela's character a little and keeping Cate Blanchett around. Thanos could have fawned over her for a couple of movies and it would have all made sense.